guys enjoy the film? I don't think I heard you. Did you guys enjoy the film? Good. Well, we're about to do a little Q&A. My name is Carla Renata. I'm the Curvy Critic. I am at Black Hollywood Live, so that's who I am. But we're about to introduce some people that you may or may not know. First up on my schedule is Mr. Kelvin Harrison Jr., the title of LUCE. And right next to him is the director, Julius Onah. And last but not least, the screenwriter, J.C. Lee. Cool. Now how this is going to work, I'm going to ask him a couple of questions. And then I'll open it up toward the end, maybe 5 minutes toward the end for any questions that you guys may have. And if you could please, when you ask your questions, keep it to a question, not a statement, not a comment, because we ain't trying to be here all night. It's late. All right. So, Kelvin. You know, I told y'all this yesterday. LUCE messed me up. It messed me up. Do you think LUCE is a superstar, a sociopath, or both?
I don't think he's a sociopath. I do think that he is a 17-year-old kid who he has very strong beliefs and a very progressive view on how he sees race and power and privilege and all these big ideas. And he's like, I'm fighting for my identity. I'm fighting for my freedom. I'm fighting for who I am. And if that might come across a little scary, it's because, you know, sometimes you gotta like, you ain't gonna get nothing, you know.
But you do it well. I'm gonna throw it on over to J.C. Lee. Now you had this on. It was on Broadway, yes, or off Broadway.
Off Broadway.
He's like off Broadway.
Way off.
It was in New York in the theater.
Yeah.
Is your mic on?
I don't know, is it? Yeah, this one. Hello? Oh,
Okay, there we go.
Okay, we'll trade.
So you had this in New York on the theater. What made you want to translate this from the stage to the screen?
I didn't. Julius wanted to. Julius spent 3 years harassing me, emailing me, calling me, trying to convince me to make this into a movie. And then every turn I was like, no, this is not a movie. Leave me alone. Who are you? But then at a certain point, he sent me an email. He had a little window of time, and he was like, look, I'm going to put something together for you to look at. Just like meet me for breakfast. And I didn't read the email. And Julius showed up to breakfast with a 120-page first draft, and I was like, this guy's fucking nuts. But then I read the draft, and I was sort of like, oh, I can see it as a movie. And so from that point forward, we sort of went back and forth, collaborating and crafting it into the film that it is now.
Okay, and this question is for both of you. How did you guys settle on Kelvin as LUCE?
I actually did not say I was putting something together. I told him I was going to write the first draft, and he just completely ignored it, as usual. Thank you, J.C. Lee. Well, you know, Kelvin, I met initially for a breakfast. He was set up to by his agent, and I just wanted to be open-minded. And we were having a conversation not too far from here at the La Brea Bakery, and Kelvin was asking a lot of questions. The kind of questions that I was like, this kid's not ever going to be in this movie. I mean,
like what?
It's nice.
I have no clue what this movie is about.
No, it was like babbling. It was really weird. But little did I know he was punking me because he got all the information that he needed out of me, and then he did not dish it and sent it to tape, and it was undeniable. It blew me away. You know, she shared it with JC. Like we all saw it. You know, my producing partners are here as well. They saw it, and we just knew this was the guy. So from there, the next step was bringing him in for a callback, just to make sure it wasn't like a doctor tape or like a deep fake or something like that. You know, and he did it in the room, and here we are.
45-minute callback too.
Oh, it was 45 minutes? What did you do in 45 minutes?
Everything.
Like what, for example? Y'all can't just be like everything and think I'm not going to ask you about it.
I'll let Kelvin tell that part of the story.
To be honest, I got really upset. I got scared. I started crying, and I had to take a break. I was like, this is a lie.
Oh, no, you had a little breakdown.
I had a little breakdown.
Oh, no. Well, I want to ask this question of all three of you. This film deals with so many issues of societal pressure. It deals with societal pressure from a privileged point of view. It deals with societal pressure from a peer point of view, especially with Luce and his friend. It deals with societal pressure of Harriet too, because Harriet has grown up in an America that expects people of color to behave and speak a certain way and hold themselves with a certain esteem. So I would like for the three of you to speak to the fact that all of these societal pressures are within the context of this film, and how much do you think that is mirrored in real life right now?
It's absolutely mirrored in real life. I mean, we're making a movie that's based on the reality we all experience, and all three of us up here are men of color. All three of us have multitudes of the identities that we possess, and part of what this movie is about is the way people from marginalized groups are often asked to live their life on a symbolic level. As you said, Harriet is coming from a generation that a certain respectability politics, just because of survival, was required, right? You have to be better than everybody else. You have to be perfect. You have to be this. You have to be that. And the struggle that Luce is dealing with is, well, if I have to be perfect, when do I get to be human, right? If the pendulum is on one extreme, you are the worst thing in the world, and that's the box we're going to put you in. And on the other extreme, you are the best thing in the world, and that's what we're going to put you in. Though one might be negative and one might be positive, neither of them are giving you access to the full spectrum of humanity. And the truth is, we all contain multitudes. So the question we're trying to ask with the story is, when do you get to be human and who gets to be human? And the ways we all view each other has a tremendous impact on who gets to be human, and the ways we all treat each other has that impact as well.
Absolutely. Kelvin, I really want to speak to you about the relationship with your friend in the film, the young man who gets kicked off the team. And he's really pissed off about that. Like, he's mad. He's mad that you are the one that's getting the attention and he's not. How do you feel that Luce is navigating in that moment, trying to like still be down with his friend, but still keep that societal pressure going with himself? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. First of all, Astro is so good.
Yeah, Astro is great.
And you probably see me reacting, just going like, I don't know how to keep up anymore.
Are you guys familiar with who Astro is?
Stro.
He goes by Stro. Okay, so Stro was on the X Factor when they did it here in the United States. The one season that they, or the two seasons that they, he was in like the first season of it. So he's transitioned from that into acting, and he's doing a really great job. This is probably like the fifth or sixth.
He's also on the Netflix See You Yesterday.
Yes, he is. He's on See You Yesterday. Thank you, my man in the front. All right, continue, baby. It's okay. Look, I need all the help I can get. It's all good.
It's on Netflix.
But yeah, for Luce, it was just kind of like, it's that moment when you know, when you're even he forgets sometimes that his privilege has been kind of given to him because of his white parents. And I think that it's a weird position to be in, because he's like, I'm still black, and I'm still, you know what I mean, I'm still you, man, like I get it. But he's like, but you don't really get it. You don't really get what you've been afforded it because of your situation. And so I think it's that I would say it's the first time he's actually had to kind of process that, and it's kind of shaking him a bit.
JC, what made you approach the subject in the first place? There's a lot going on, dude. It's a lot.
Really? It's like a buddy comedy for me. I think, it's funny, as I was listening to Julius and Kelvin talk, it reminded me that I identify with Luce in this idea of having to be the model minority. And I think that because I'm biracial, it was easy for me to code switch. So it was easy for me to slip into one group and everyone think I'm part of that group, learn that group's vocabulary, and then slip into another group. And it gave me a level of self-awareness that I think a lot of people probably don't have at the age that I developed it. And I think that a lot of the sort of anxieties that Luce deals with, and for sure the rage that he feels at people that, there's this assumption, I think, that well, if you're of color, then all people of color understand the same thing, but it's like, Harriet is of a different generation than Luce and has a different set of values and beliefs, and Luce is growing up in an America where Barack Obama was president already, and so not that necessarily changes the actual dynamic of a racist system, but it changes our expectation. And I think that the rage that he feels at being sort of put into a certain kind of box. I understand that rage, like emotionally, but also like intellectually. And so for me, the play and then the film was about unpacking all of that and then giving people a chance to have conversations about it.
And we're having a conversation, a really good one. I'm so glad we're able to have this conversation. I think I'm gonna open it up to some questions. Yes, ma'am.
What changed from the play to the script?
Her question was, what changed from the play to the script?
So a bunch of stuff changed. I mean, one of the benefits of working with Julius is that we have a really great working vocabulary, and also that we have a lot of trust. So when Julius, I think it's important to have a collaborator who can sort of crack the thing open for you in a way that you can't see it. So like, I had worked on the play for several years, my blinders were sort of like this, and Julius just took it and sort of went like that. So like, Principal Dan is a character that you hear about in the play, but we meet him in the movie. Harriet didn't have a sister in the play. All of Luce's friends we hear about in the play, but we actually get to see them in the film. And so Julius helped just sort of like crack it open a little bit more so that it had the scope of a feature film, and that we can get inside some of these issues with more depth, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it was. You know, the movie maintains the core and the integrity of the play. The play, what I loved about it was it already had the engine, the mechanism of a thriller. So the way it reveals information and subverts your expectations. So it was really about, you know, there's a way I learned about talking about these things where you expand something vertically and horizontally. And horizontally is you're adding more plot, you're adding more characters, you're just expanding the telling of the tale. But then vertically is taking those themes and making them a little bit more expansive. And that's what we try to do with the movie. But look, it all started with the beauty of the play.
Can I just say, it kept the tension of a theatrical psychological drama. It kept that and expanded it, which is beautiful.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I'm glad you brought up Harriet's sister, JC. That was a moment that was very jarring for a variety of reasons. One, because we're dealing with a mental health person of color, which that is not spoken about in that area at all. And we're also dealing with someone who is really gone. In that scene where she's taking her clothes off in the school, that was just, it broke my heart, but it was so necessary, I felt like. What made you guys decide to show that in all its ugliness?
You look, there's a truth to the world we live in. And it's often you see stories that explore issues of race and identity and class, and they want to tell us the version of the story, which I understand sometimes, that reassures us and makes us feel comfortable and makes us feel safe. But in my mind, I think that's disingenuous to the truth that so many people live. We have issues of mental health in communities of color that are not addressed because of the fact that there's limited access. And especially when you think about Harriet's relationship with her sister, Harriet in some ways is like Luce. She represents that version of rising above where you came from. But there's also those who don't all get that opportunity, right? If there's one Barack Obama, what about everybody else? And often when we take a symbol of success and make that the barometer by which everybody should live by, we forget the fact that there's so many who are left behind. So for me, having the sister in the movie and seeing what Harriet is negotiating, you get a sense of her vulnerability, you get a sense of her pain, you get a sense of everything she's trying to leave behind, but you also are challenged to not forget what is left behind. And in that school, in that scene, she's vulnerable. Everything that she thinks that she's projecting and she is comes back. And you know, it's something that when you look at the duality between them and then also between Luce and Deshawn, I think it tells you a lot about the difficult, raw, complicated situation that we're in right now, especially in marginalized communities.
JC, you were gonna say something?
I want to echo everything that Julia said. I also think like there's something about the way that the importance of storytelling in this film and how the stories we tell ourselves and how we always tell ourselves that like if I do a good thing will happen in the end and we'll all live happily ever after. And there's something about mental health that is a direct rebuttal to that idea of the world, that like you don't just take a pill and get better. It's really antithetical to like the American story in a lot of ways, and that's why I felt like it was important. I also just feel like I've seen a lot of movies where the pain of people of color is sort of like, it's commodified in a certain way, and it's sort of like, look, we suffered through this so that we could have this. But that's not how history or like pain works. You know what I mean? Like people suffer and they suffer, and that's the end of the story. You know what I mean? And that hopefully that we can make that suffering alleviated as time goes by, but not always. And so there's something about Rosemary that feels very, in the way that Julius was just saying, feels very truthful to me, and isn't easily resolved. Like and I think that's important to see.
Yeah, and one more thing to even add to that is the way the perception of Harriet changes when that side of her family is exposed in the community where she traditionally has power and prestige, which is the school. And especially when Luce's parents see that video and they're like, oh, we didn't, and the mark you get against you often as a person of color. And how that strike against you starts to become your reality. And it's a big part of the question that the movie is asking, again, who has to be perfect?
Yeah, it goes back to that perception of, if you're, as a person of color, whether you're Latino, Asian, or Black, there is that, it almost feels like there is that need for society, that from society, that you have to be perfect, and when you're not, then they're like, see,
There you go.
look,
Yeah,
there you
you
go,
deserve
there,
this.
look what happened, see, they're not this, they're not that, so, I feel you. The truth, I'm gonna come to y'all in a second, I just got one more question. The truth has many faces is the tagline of the film. How many faces did y'all have to go through to get the story told?
Look, this is one of those rare miracle stories of an independent film coming together. And I think it all started with the integrity of what JC created with the play. And when you have something beautiful that starts with the right intentions and with the right spirit, that carries you the rest of the way forward. We were lucky to have a really wonderful collaboration where we trusted each other. And then from there, the first actor who came on board the film was Octavia Spencer. And I remember my first conversation, brilliant. She gives a brilliant performance. I remember my first conversation with her. She said, Julius, I know this woman. And that was the end of the conversation. Because once Octavia Spencer tells you, I know this woman, that's it. But she was also such an anchor. And then from there, the amazing Kelvin Harrison Jr. came on board, Naomi came, Tim came, and everybody came with the right spirit and attitude. I was fortunate to make this film with some of my best friends and our producers here, John, Eric, and Rob. So we were a real family making this movie, and I think we all wore one face, and that was just a face of a family, to quote Fast and Furious.
And I'll add also, just because Julius won't say this, but Julius, part of what made it successful was that Julius was a steward of story. Like he was never going to compromise making a complicated film, and you need someone at the center of it, steering it, who's not going to compromise the vision of what we're gonna make. Because there's a version of this movie that's about a psychopathic kid, and we've all seen The Bad Seed. Like there's a version of that, and we were never interested in making that movie, and Julius was never interested in making that movie. And so part of it was also he was sort of like, this is the film we're making. He was always clear about it, and people got on board for that vision.
All right, okay. I have time for one question. I'm gonna go all the way in the back, the lady with the blonde hair. Yeah, you.
This could be a sequel to becoming a politician, and this coming up in his background.
Sorry, what was the question?
Say that one more time.
Like the sequel to this could be Luce coming up as a politician, and this coming back to haunt him in his past.
You know what? I'm gonna steal that.
You know what's funny? I had a producer once who read the play and was like, we should make a TV show out of Luce as a character, but he's like running for office
Exactly.
in like a city. And I was like, that's kind of cool, but I'm already making.
Here's what I'll say. The last shot of the movie was intended as kind of a Rorschach test, where when we look at people and project on them, it's up to us what we bring. And I just imagine this vision of this boy who has gone through so much in this story and everybody around him. But if you saw him jogging down the street in the morning, who would you think he is? What would you think he's running from? What do you think he's running to? So, if that is the story, wonderful. But at the end of the day, what I love about the potential of this is that each one of you here get to find your own way out of this story and decide what you think about who he is and what's happening in the film.
Cool. Right there, the one who's like this.
Oh, me? Can you speak to the critical race theory that is kind of structuring the beginning and of the narrative and then kind of comes throughout with the Frantz Fanon piece?
Yeah, I can speak a bit to that. I mean, look, when Kelvin was preparing the movie, I had him read Black Skin and White Mass and also read The Wretched of the Earth. And look, I didn't want to get into every single bit because especially this is very, very dense theory. But there's this idea that in Wretched of the Earth that Fanon talks about violence being a liberating force, especially when you think about the way colonization worked in Africa and in every colonized nation and community. Violence was used to oppress people, and perhaps violence is a potential way to liberate. So what I loved about that idea, and it was something that was already in the play, was it speaks to some of what Luce is going through in this story, right? If I live in a society that is still racist, where violence is often used, and we all can just look at the news to see how violence is continued to be used to marginalize people of color, from a philosophical level, from a theoretical level, is it unfair to ask that question, even in America, that violence can be a liberating force? This is a country that's built on the back of violence. Violence against brown bodies, violence against Native Americans, violence against so many groups. So the exploration of it in his paper is what it is. It's an exploration. I think the more interesting thing is the way Harriet chooses to react to that exploration, right? Here's a kid who's coming from a history of violence as a child soldier. And when she reads his paper, she essentially profiles him. She decides, well, what if you are now capable of violence? What action do I need to take? So on some level, she too is putting him in a box. And what was interesting to me about that was, again, going back to Fanon and this notion that some of us internalize the mindset of the oppressor, and that is at the core of this philosophical difference between Luce and Harriet. Luce thinks that she is incapable of decolonizing her mind. He thinks that she has absorbed this idea that she has to subscribe to respectability politics, that black people can't just be human, they have to be superhuman to succeed. And that's why she treats the Deshans of the world the way she does and pushes them down in her mind, and that's why the Luces of the world get